What if television in the 1970s was far more dangerous than anyone remembers? Beneath simple broadcasts and quiet living rooms, there were stories that crossed lines and never looked back. These films did not just entertain. They disturbed. They questioned reality. They pushed ideas that felt too dark for their time. And the deeper you go into this list, the more unsettling those risks become. Number 13, The Night Stalker, 1972. Las Vegas does not feel like a place where monsters hide in shadows. It is loud, bright, alive. Yet this film begins by quietly suggesting that something ancient is feeding beneath all that light. A reporter named Carl Kolchak follows a trail of murders that refuse to make sense. Victims are drained of blood. Evidence vanishes. Authorities dismiss everything. But Kolchak keeps digging, and what he uncovers feels impossible even for television at the time. What made this story go too far was not just the presence of a vampire. It was the way the film treated the idea with unsettling realism. There are no gothic castles or dramatic music cues. Instead, there is paperwork, police resistance, media pressure. The horror feels procedural and grounded, which makes every revelation more disturbing. Audiences were not watching fantasy. They were watching something that felt like it could exist just out of sight. That shift changed television forever. Number 12, The Night Strangler, 1973. If the first film cracked open the door, then this sequel kicks it wide open. Carl Kolchak returns, but this time, the horror is deeper and far more unsettling. The murders point towards something that has existed for over a century, a killer who refuses to die, a pattern that stretches through history. Suddenly, this is not just about one creature. It is about a world where death itself may not apply. The film pushes further by blending science fiction with horror in a way that television rarely attempted at the time. There is talk of ancient biology, regeneration, longevity that defies natural laws. Instead of simple fear, the story introduces dread tied to the idea of time itself. What if something has always been there watching, waiting, killing across generations? That concept lands harder than any jump scare. Viewers were left with a lingering unease because the film never fully comforts them. It suggests that some truths are buried, not because they are false, but because they are too dangerous to accept. For 1970s television, this level of existential horror was far beyond the norm. Number 11, Genesis 2, 1973. Beneath the surface of this post-apocalyptic world lies something far more disturbing than simple survival. A man from the past awakens into a future shaped by disaster and division. Society is no longer united. It has fractured into strange underground civilizations, each with their own twisted rules. One of them believes in genetic superiority and absolute control. That idea alone pushes the story into uncomfortable territory. Created by Gene Roddenberry, this film feels like a darker reflection of optimistic science fiction. Instead of hope, it offers a warning. Humanity does not evolve into something better. It splits, mutates, turns inward. The underground society portrayed here does not just feel alien. It feels disturbingly human in its obsession with power and purity. What makes this film go too far is how openly it explores control over bodies and identity. People are reduced to roles. Individual freedom is erased. The future becomes a place where morality is rewritten by those in charge. For network television, this level of philosophical weight combined with unsettling imagery made the film feel far ahead of its time. It is not just science fiction, it is a quiet nightmare about what humanity might become. Number 10, The Stranger Within, 1974. There is something deeply unsettling about a story that begins with quiet domestic life and slowly turns into a nightmare that no one else seems willing to acknowledge. A woman lives a normal existence until she begins to feel that something inside her is not right. Her body changes in ways that cannot be explained. Doctors offer calm reassurance, yet their certainty feels hollow. Her husband listens but never truly hears the fear in her voice. What unfolds is not just a science fiction story, it is a loss of control that becomes impossible to ignore. The film moves into territory that television rarely dared to explore at the time. The idea of forced alien impregnation is presented without comfort or distance. There is no heroic intervention. There is no clear explanation. The horror grows slowly through confusion and isolation. The woman at the center is left alone with a reality that others refuse to accept. That emotional distance makes every moment heavier. It turns a science fiction premise into something personal and deeply disturbing. What pushes this story beyond limits is how it treats the human body as something that can be taken over without consent. It strips away safety and replaces it with uncertainty. The final moments refuse to offer peace. Instead, they leave the audience with a chilling realization that the invasion may already be complete. For a television audience in the 1970s, this was not just bold, it was deeply unsettling. Number 9. The Questor Tapes, 1974. At first glance, this appears to be a familiar story about a machine that learns to think like a human. But this film quickly moves into far more complex territory. Questor is not just an android, he is a being searching for purpose. His creator disappears, leaving behind incomplete instructions. That absence becomes the central tension. A machine with immense intelligence is left to decide its own path without guidance. The narrative slowly builds a sense of unease as Questor begins to question the very nature of humanity. He observes human behavior with clarity that feels almost uncomfortable. He sees contradictions, violence, emotional instability. The more he learns, the less certain he becomes about whether humans deserve the future they are building. That philosophical weight pushes the story far beyond simple science fiction. What makes this film go too far for its time is its refusal to present humans as superior. Instead, it suggests that artificial intelligence may develop a stronger moral framework than its creators. The idea that a machine could judge humanity was unsettling for television audiences who were used to clear heroes and villains. Here, there is only ambiguity. As Questor moves through the world, he becomes both observer and judge. The film leaves the audience with a question that lingers long after it ends. If something more logical and more ethical replaces us, would that be evolution or extinction? That question alone makes this story far more daring than it first appears. Number 8. Killdozer, 1974. It begins with something simple. A construction crew working on a remote island uncovers a strange glowing object buried deep beneath the ground. There is curiosity at first, then confusion, then fear. When the bulldozer makes contact with the object, something awakens. Not a creature, not a visible force, but an intelligence that takes control of the machine itself. What follows is relentless and brutal. The idea of a possessed machine may sound strange, yet the film treats it with absolute seriousness. The bulldozer becomes unstoppable. It moves with purpose. It hunts. One by one, the workers are eliminated in ways that feel shockingly direct for television at the time. There is no escape into humor or exaggeration. The violence is presented with a cold sense of inevitability that makes each encounter more intense. What pushes this film beyond limits is its refusal to provide comfort. There is no clear explanation for the force controlling the machine. It is not explained. It simply exists. That lack of understanding creates a deeper fear. Technology becomes something that can turn against humanity without warning. The very tools meant to build the future become instruments of destruction. By the time the story reaches its final moments, the audience is left with a haunting image. A machine moving without a driver, guided by something unseen. For 1970s television, this concept felt dangerously close to reality. It suggested that progress itself might carry hidden consequences that no one is prepared to face. Number 7. Where Have All the People Gone? 1974. Silence can be more terrifying than any monster. This film understands that from its very first moments, a solar event wipes out most of humanity without warning. There is no explosion, no dramatic destruction. People simply collapse. Families vanish in an instant. What remains is a quiet, empty world where the absence of life becomes the central horror. A father and his children emerge from survival into a landscape that no longer feels human. Streets are abandoned. Homes stand open. Nature begins to reclaim what once belonged to people. The film does not rush through this devastation. It lingers on it. It forces the viewer to sit inside that emptiness and feel the weight of what has been lost. That decision alone pushes the story far beyond typical television expectations. As the survivors search for others, they encounter not hope, but fragments of humanity. Some cling to sanity. Others begin to unravel. Isolation becomes the true enemy. Without structure or society, people start to lose their sense of purpose. The film explores this psychological collapse with a quiet intensity that feels deeply unsettling. It suggests that survival is not just about staying alive. It is about holding on to identity when everything familiar disappears. What makes this film go too far is its refusal to offer comfort. There is no quick rebuilding of civilization. There is no heroic solution. The world remains broken and uncertain. Even moments of connection feel fragile. The future is not promised. It is questioned. For audiences in the 1970s, this kind of bleak storytelling was rare on television. It stripped away the illusion that humanity would always recover. Instead, it presented a haunting possibility that one day everything could end not with chaos but with silence, and that silence might be the most frightening thing of all. Number 6. Earth 2, 1971. High above the planet, a new world is being built, a space station designed to represent unity, cooperation, a future beyond conflict. On the surface, it feels like a hopeful vision of what humanity could become. But as the story unfolds, that vision begins to fracture. The station becomes a stage for political tension that mirrors the divisions on Earth rather than escaping them. The film presents a conflict that feels disturbingly real. Nations argue over control. Military interests clash with scientific ideals. The dream of a peaceful orbit quickly becomes entangled in the same power struggles that define life on the ground. This is where the story begins to push beyond safe territory. It suggests that humanity cannot simply leave its problems behind. It carries them into every new frontier. As tensions rise, the station becomes vulnerable. A single decision could trigger disaster not just in space, but across the entire planet. The idea that orbiting technology could be turned into a weapon introduces a chilling layer of realism. For viewers in the 1970s, this was not distant science fiction. It felt like a reflection of real-world fears about global conflict and technological escalation. What makes this film go too far is its quiet cynicism. It does not celebrate progress, it questions it. The station meant to unite humanity instead exposes how deeply divided it remains. There are no easy answers, only compromises that feel temporary and fragile. By the end, the audience is left with a troubling thought. If humanity cannot find peace on Earth, what chance does it have in space? The future is not guaranteed to be better. It may simply be a continuation of the same struggles played out on a larger stage. That idea lingers long after the film ends. Number 5. The People, 1972. At first glance, the town feels peaceful, quiet, almost untouched by the outside world. But there is something unusual about the people who live there. They move with a sense of calm that feels unnatural. They communicate in ways that do not rely on words. And slowly it becomes clear that this is not a normal community. It is something else entirely. A doctor arrives seeking answers, and what he discovers challenges everything he understands about humanity. The people of the town possess telepathic abilities. They share thoughts, emotions, memories. There are no secrets among them. That level of connection might sound ideal, yet the film presents it as something far more complex and unsettling. Individual identity begins to blur, personal boundaries fade. The deeper the doctor investigates, the more he realizes that these people are not simply different. They may not be entirely human. Their origins remain mysterious, and their intentions are never fully explained. That ambiguity creates a quiet tension that runs through the entire story. It suggests that this peaceful community may represent a form of evolution that humanity is not prepared to understand. What pushes this film beyond limits is how it treats the loss of individuality. The idea of a shared consciousness is presented as both beautiful and terrifying. There is harmony, but at the cost of independence. There is understanding, but no privacy. The film forces the audience to question whether true connection requires sacrificing what makes us human. In the final moments, there is no clear resolution, only a lingering uncertainty about what the future holds, whether this new form of existence is a step forward or a quiet replacement. For television in the 1970s, this level of philosophical exploration felt bold and deeply unsettling. Number 4. Doomsday Machine, 1972. Far out in space, a routine mission turns into something far more terrifying than anyone on board could have imagined. The crew intercepts fragments of a destroyed spacecraft and soon discover that Earth itself may already be gone. Not damaged, not under attack. Gone. Replaced by silence and uncertainty. The shock of that realization hits slowly, and that is exactly what makes it so effective. The film does not rush to spectacle. It lingers on disbelief, on denial, on the creeping understanding that there may be no home left to return to. The story unfolds inside the confined environment of a spacecraft where tension builds with every passing moment. Supplies are limited, communication is uncertain, and the psychological pressure begins to fracture the crew. Each character reacts differently to the possibility of extinction. Some cling to hope. Others begin to unravel under the weight of isolation and fear. That internal breakdown becomes just as dangerous as the external threat. The film quietly suggests that humanity may not need an enemy to destroy itself. The fear alone may be enough. See, what makes this film go too far is its willingness to embrace total annihilation as a real possibility. For television audiences in the 1970s, the idea that Earth could simply vanish without warning was deeply unsettling. There is no heroic intervention, no last-minute rescue, only the slow realization that everything familiar may already be lost. The absence of certainty becomes the true horror. As the narrative moves toward its conclusion, the film refuses to provide clear answers. The threat remains distant, yet overwhelming. The crew is left drifting between survival and despair. And the audience is left with a chilling question. If everything ends without warning, what meaning does survival even hold? That quiet existential dread is what pushes this film beyond the boundaries of safe television storytelling. Number 3. The Norliss Tapes, 1973. The film begins with disappearance. A respected investigator vanishes, leaving behind recorded tapes that document his final case. What unfolds through those recordings feels less like a traditional narrative and more like a descent into something deeply unnatural. Each tape reveals fragments of a mystery that refuses to follow logical rules. Science begins to blur with the supernatural, and the line between reality and fear becomes harder to define. At the center of the story is a series of events that involve reanimation and dark forces that do not behave like anything understood by modern science. The idea that death itself can be reversed is presented not as a miracle, but as something deeply wrong. Bodies move without life. Actions occur without explanation. The film builds its horror through atmosphere rather than spectacle. It allows uncertainty to grow until it becomes overwhelming. What pushes this story beyond limits is its commitment to ambiguity. There is no clear explanation for what is happening. The forces at work are never fully understood. This lack of clarity creates a lingering unease that stays with the audience long after the film ends. It suggests that there are aspects of existence that cannot be explained or controlled. That idea alone was far more unsettling than anything that could be shown directly on screen. The use of recorded tapes adds another layer of tension. The audience is not watching events unfold in real time. They are listening to something that has already happened. That distance creates a sense of inevitability. Whatever fate awaited the investigator has already been sealed. The viewer is simply catching up to it. By the final moments, the film leaves behind more questions than answers. It does not attempt to resolve the mystery. Instead, it deepens it. For television in the 1970s, this approach was bold. It trusted the audience to sit with discomfort rather than offering easy closure. That willingness to embrace uncertainty is what makes this film feel far more dangerous than it first appears. Number 2. A Cold Night's Death, 1973. There is a certain kind of fear that does not come from what you see, but from what you cannot explain. This film builds its entire identity around that idea. Two scientists arrive at a remote research station buried deep in isolation. The location itself feels wrong from the moment they enter. Equipment is abandoned. Records are incomplete. The previous team is gone without a trace. Nothing is directly stated, yet everything suggests that something went terribly wrong. As the investigation begins, small details start to unravel the sense of safety. Sounds echo through empty corridors. Objects appear where they should not be. The scientists attempt to rationalize every anomaly through logic and training, but the environment refuses to cooperate. The more they search for answers, the more unstable their perception becomes. The film carefully constructs a psychological descent rather than relying on visible threats. It forces both characters and audience to question what is real and what is imagined. What makes this film go too far is its commitment to intellectual horror. It does not rely on monsters or dramatic confrontation. Instead, it attacks the mind itself. The possibility that unseen forces could influence human thought becomes the central fear. For viewers in the 1970s, this concept felt deeply unsettling because it removed the idea of control. If perception can be manipulated, then reality itself becomes unreliable. The isolation intensifies every moment. There is no outside help, no escape. The scientists are trapped not just physically, but mentally. Each discovery leads to more confusion rather than clarity. The film never fully explains what happened to the previous team, and that absence becomes its greatest strength. It leaves a void that the audience is forced to fill with their own fears. By the end, the story offers no comfort. Only the suggestion that knowledge itself can be dangerous, that some truths are not meant to be uncovered, and that once the mind begins to fracture, there may be no way to restore it. That quiet psychological destruction is what pushes this film beyond safe television boundaries. Number 1. Future Cop, 1976. At first, this story presents itself as something familiar. A police officer partners with an advanced android designed to assist in law enforcement. The premise feels almost optimistic. Technology working alongside humanity, efficiency replacing chaos. But beneath that surface lies a far more unsettling question about what happens when machines begin to mirror human behavior too closely. The android at the center of the story is not simply a tool, it learns, it adapts. It observes human emotion and attempts to replicate it. That process creates moments that feel both fascinating and deeply uncomfortable. The machine does not fully understand morality, yet it operates within systems that demand judgment. The result is a growing tension between logic and empathy. The film slowly reveals that replacing human decision-making with artificial reasoning may not lead to a better world. What pushes this film beyond limits is its subtle critique of control. Law enforcement represents authority, order, power. Introducing an android into that system raises questions that the story does not fully answer. Who is responsible when a machine makes a decision? Can accountability exist without human intent? These ideas were far ahead of their time, especially for television audiences in the 1970s. As the narrative unfolds, the relationship between human and machine becomes increasingly complex. Trust begins to erode. Doubt replaces certainty. The android is no longer just a partner. It becomes a reflection of humanity stripped of emotion yet capable of influence. That duality creates a quiet tension that runs through every scene. By the final moments, the film leaves the audience with an unsettling realization. Technology is not neutral. It carries the values of those who create it and the flaws of the systems it serves. The future may not belong to humans alone, and that future may not be as controlled as it appears. That lingering uncertainty is what makes this story feel far more dangerous than its simple premise suggests. These stories were never meant to feel safe. They were experiments that slipped past limits and left lasting scars on television history. Some were forgotten, others became cult legends, but all of them proved one thing. When science fiction dares to go too far, it reveals truths we are not ready to face.